This video covers resampling the cell size of a roster, and we usually do this when we need to meet the condition of having the same cell size when we're using a roster calculator and when we're doing roster overlay. It's very important that the two rosters in any processing between the two have the same cell size. So if one roster is, say, 500 meters in length and height, and another roster has a cell size of 30 by 30 meters, we should bring everything down to 30 meters. So to do that, we usually will have to resample the size of one of the rosters to meet the condition of the other roster. So this tutorial covers doing that particular process. So I'm using a land cover roster from Haiti. I should say for Haiti, from Diva GIS, and I also have in the working environment right now in ArcGIS, I have an admin layer for Haiti, so I just have the country border here. So let's take a look at the cell level. Let's zoom in real closely. I'm going to turn off the admin there, and I need to find a cell size on the edge that is the actual cell size of the whole roster. So if I do a right click on the roster and go to properties, I'll be able to see the properties under source here. So the cell size we can see is 0.008333333, and this is in degrees, which is a bit of an issue because you want to usually have all your roster processing at some point in time in a projected system, because oftentimes you'll want to be calculating based on planar units for things like per square mile, quantities and concentrations, etc. So, but we can do this transformation regardless of if it's in a projected or a unprojected system. So right now we're in WGS, we're in a coordinate system, but it's not projected, and it sees degrees. So this is the cell size, X versus Y. If I want to know the actual cell size in terms of a planar unit, I can measure it out with my measuring tool, and I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. So if I go to measure and go to distance, I can pick my distance. So I'm going to test this in kilometers. So here I bring my, I'm going to zoom in at my cell level here, and I'm going to click on one side and go to the other side. So it looks like I'm about 1 kilometer, and if I go from the bottom to the top, looks like it's about 1 kilometer too. So this is kind of an approximation, but usually for something that you're getting that's already been processed by agency or a government or some type of open data platform, it's usually going to be in a cell size that is consistent with pretty predictable units. So it might be 1 kilometer, it might be 500 meters, a 30-meter product, on and on. But you're usually not going to get a product. So it's going to be 59.8 meters. It's going to be a 60-meter product in that case. Okay, so once we know the actual cell size, then we need to have a cell size that we want to go to, and oftentimes that will be your smaller roster cell size between your two rosters. So I'm just going to pretend right now that I have a 30-meter roster product. If I wanted to go to 30 meters, then I would, when I resample it, I would say cell size, you need to be 30 meters. In this case, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to scale it down and just by itself. So if I go to Arc Toolbox, we'll find this under Data Management Tools in Roster. If we click on roster, we can go to roster processing, and I'm sorry, not roster processing. Actually, yeah, it is roster processing. I just clicked on the wrong box there. Now I want to go to resample. It's right towards the bottom. So if I click on resample, I'm going to input my roster, and so in this case it's Haiti, it's land cover. And here I'm going to send it to default geodatabase, and I'll just use the name that it gives me. Now here's what's important. So on the output cell size, if I have another roster in my table of contents, it will see that other roster, and oftentimes that's the roster. If that has the smaller cell size, you can just say use the cell size from this roster. Okay. Right now we have in angular degrees a measurement for our length and the width of the cell size, and this is a little bit cumbersome in terms of a measurement. Because it doesn't really give us a planar unit that really makes sense to us. But we'll go ahead and work with this anyhow in the format that it's in. So I can change the X size and also the Y size, or the height and the width of the cell size. So since I don't have another roster for this demonstration, I'm going to actually change the cell size here. So instead of it being 0.008333 degrees across, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make this a 5. So I'm going to change my 8 to 5. That's going to shrink the cell size, and we'll see what happens. So I put that at 5. Now here I'm going to go ahead and copy this value and put it into my X, because usually in rosters we want to have the same X versus Y, or X and Y cell size. We want it to be rectangular and basically square. The resampling technique is important. So on the resampling technique, it's going to go through your roster and it's going to change the cell size based on basically a system interpolation. And if we choose nearest oftentimes works well for pixels values that are discrete in nature, and land cover would certainly be discrete. We can use bilinear for something that's more of a continuous surface like DEM. So depending on what type of roster you have coming into the system to resample, you'll choose a resampling technique that will fit that particular roster, its type, the best. So I'm all set up here. I'm going to go down to a 0.00533333 X and a Y cell size. Optimally, I would have another layer here that would have my actual cell size that I want to, and I don't have to do this XY calculation. But in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and send it to that and say OK, and let's see what happens. So run the tool, and let's take a look at the results. So if I zoom back out, we can see that I have a new roster now, and importantly the cell values haven't changed. So I still have a 22, I still have a 20, on and on. But what has changed, if I zoom in to the edge of my roster up here, let's see if we can find a pixel here. This pixel now is much smaller than what I originally started with, so we can literally see the growth. So I have the small one that I resampled on top, and we can see that it's shrunk down. We can see the actual cell size has changed quite a bit. So let's go take a look at our measuring tool now, and we're going to measure the new cell size that we have here. So I'll use my measuring tool, and let's take a look and see what we got. So I'm at about a 0.5 kilometer, whereas before I was at about 1 kilometer. Okay, so that's how you basically do a resampling of the cell size, and again, we're meeting the condition that both cell sizes in both rosters, before we do any roster analysis, they need to be the same size. So we need to do this resampling process if we have one roster cell size that's different than another in our final roster analysis.